A candidate for the approaching election in Montreal, the television personality Leslie Roberts, wrote an article recently against doubling down on cyclist ideology. We have 5 to 6 months of winter weather, suburban sprawl, and a daily reality where most people still rely on cars. Bike infrastructure is so last season. It's time to move on and go back to the basics. I've covered winter and density so many times on this channel, so let's set them aside for now. Also set aside the obvious response. We're trying to change that reality by supporting other options. He ended the article by saying this, and we haven't even looked at the price tag. Whatever the cost, one thing is clear. The money will be far better spent fixing our roads and upgrading essential infrastructure. Well, if you're not going to do it, why don't we look at the price tag? Whatever the cost, I'm sure it's too much, is really a cheap shot. In this video, I want to cover, how much does bike infrastructure cost? Is it worth it? The one big thing people misunderstand about how it's built, and what worries me most about this election. Let's check in with someone who knows what they're talking about.
My name is Marianne Giguère. I'm a city councillor. I'm elected on the Plateau Montreal borough. It's been 12 years now, so it's my third term. And since Valérie Plante was elected, I was in charge of the bicycle infrastructures and culture with the committee executive.
This city has built an impressive amount of bike infrastructure over the past 8 years. How much are we spending?
Since 2017 and 18, it just grew from 15 millions to 30 millions. So this is what the investment budget is. So it's basically the concrete infrastructures.
They also introduced a program for major maintenance, $10 million a year. This year, there are a few dozen projects, big and small, under construction. Here are a few examples. This older two-way bike lane used to end here. With construction this summer, it's being extended by almost a kilometer to link up with multiple other bike routes. It's going to transition into separate one-way bike lanes, still under construction. Here's a bigger project. This 8-lane arterial is being transformed into a sustainable mobility corridor, with bus lanes and comfortably wide bike lanes. This is one of the most exciting projects in the city. It's being done in phases, but in the end it's supposed to cover a massive 18 kilometers. I'm a big believer in bike lanes being long and direct instead of twisting in and out of different streets. It's just so much easier to understand and follow. It's corridors like this that end up being game changers, connecting so many different routes and neighborhoods, just like the Rev Saint Denis over the past 5 years. And there's still lots of space for cars, with 2 lanes in each direction. That's what I'd call a more balanced use of space on the street. With combined projects like this, they can split apart the bike and the transit budgets. Those are just a few of the dozens of projects being built in 2025, under the $30 million budget for new bike infrastructure. But how much is that in context? Most bike lane money is in the city's capital budget, long-term infrastructure investments. Over the next decade, they plan to spend $44 million a year on construction and major maintenance. That's about 6% of total spending planned for the city's road network, $700 million a year. It's under 2% of total capital spending, $2.5 billion a year. That's everything from buildings to vehicles to major park work and underground utilities. This is looking at only city spending. It doesn't include Quebec's announcement of spending $600 million a year on provincial highway infrastructure in Montreal, for example. For comparison, the city's operational budget, recurring day-to-day expenses, is about $7 billion a year. That's things like fire, police, garbage collection, transit subsidies, and administration. So yeah, bike infrastructure costs money. It's not free. But 6% of the city's capital budget for roads, and a much smaller percentage of all spending, hardly seems excessive, especially when bike infrastructure is so far behind. Imagine you lived in a city that didn't have sidewalks. Crazy, right? If you wanted to add them, you'd need a period of sustained spending. Here's the one thing most people don't realize about building bike infrastructure, even many advocates, to the frustration of engineers and other people working behind the scenes. It's quite expensive to dig up and remake a street. That's why in cities like Montreal and elsewhere, there are 2 broad types of bike infrastructure. One is quick build or transitory designs. They use paint and flex posts, sometimes parking, and maybe limited amounts of concrete to build a usable bike lane for relatively cheap. You can still give bikes lots of space and even some protection, but you can't majorly change the structure of the road. Then you have permanent designs like this that look much nicer and more coherent. The bike lane can feel like its own space as opposed to a cordoned off section of road. They could have more substantial protection or separation from traffic. But they require bigger changes to the surface and structure of the road, so usually projects like this one are not done on their own. Usually cities save these and tack them onto other infrastructure projects that were going to happen anyway. When you have to rip open a street for work on utilities, water, sewer, electric, you can use that opportunity to rebuild the bike lane much nicer. Also, sidewalks and greenery. The downside is that we don't get the nicest infrastructure as soon as we want. Utility and road work is on its own schedule. It can be years or decades before construction like this. The upside is that fancy bike lanes that would cost a lot on their own are much cheaper, and over the course of a generation, that can add up to a lot of high-quality infrastructure. But a lot of people don't understand this. They see an expensive roadwork project and they attribute the entire cost to the bike lane.
For example, Despins. Pine Avenue, rebuilding of the whole street and the underground infrastructures. So it was a 30 million project. The very bicycle part of it was 1 million. The contract was 30 million, and this is what was going on, like an information between people. Oh, they're doing a 30 million investment just for bike path. Of course not. A very big hole, and everything was rebuilt, and a lot of new trees and wider sidewalks, and the whole street changed. And it's the same on Christophe Colomb. We have part of Christophe Colomb right now that the whole street is being rebuilt. We take advantage of to put new infrastructures. And the very bicycle part of it, I don't have the calculation, but you can see the proportion is very small.
This new corridor actually has examples of both. An amazing permanent design where the street was ripped up for utility work, and a simpler, cheaper design elsewhere. So we have a funny situation where the fanciest bike infrastructure in particular is much cheaper than it seems.
It's the cheapest proportionally to the investment and the result, because it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's safe. It's not protected by parking and bollards.
Montreal is in a unique position where multiple generations of roads are coming up for utility and road work at once.
The older ones are 100 years old, and they're at the end of their lives. We have to redo them. Other streets, other infrastructures that were made 15, 16 years ago, they're also finished. They're also done because they were less good materials and how it was made at that time. So their life was a lot shorter. And this is a very bad fate that the city has, is that those two period of infrastructures with very different way of working and material use, they have to be done at the same time. So it explains why we have so many roadworks going on.
It's a big opportunity to make our city function and look better. But Montreal has an election coming up, and I'm worried. The main opposition party, the one this guy is running for, they're up in the polls, albeit with a lot of undecideds. On top of writing articles against cyclist ideology, they've talked about pausing new bike infrastructure for a time and even auditing the existing network. They haven't been entirely clear on their plans, so that leaves us guessing. I don't think it's a Doug Ford situation of trying to rip out the busiest bike lanes in the network, but I am worried about some recent and politically contentious routes. And I worry even more about missed opportunities. Having so many streets needing work soon, if you opt out of bike infrastructure, you're giving up on the street for a very long time, at least as far as permanent infrastructure is concerned. Remember, tacking on bike lanes to major reconstruction or utility work gets you really top-notch bike infrastructure for relatively cheap. It's like cleaning out your stuff when you move. You're already taking everything apart. It's the perfect time to organize and make improvements. If the amazing bike lane on this road hadn't been done with the utility work, it wouldn't come up again for I don't even know how many decades. That's what I worry about most if a bike-skeptical party comes to power. It's not ripping out Saint Denis, it's passing on these once-in-a-generation opportunities to get great bike lanes for cheap. At the end of the day, bike infrastructure just doesn't cost that much money. Even with Montreal's ambitious plans and bike lanes having to play catch-up to a century of car-centric design. Want to see the numbers for yourself? This is major maintenance, this is construction, and this is the total. Link in description. Bike infrastructure is cheaper than you think because cities plan for it. When they want to build a bike lane fast or on its own schedule, they use cheaper, transitory designs. The nicer, permanent designs that would be expensive on their own, those are usually tacked on to other projects. The article basically said, whatever the cost, I'm sure it's better spent elsewhere. When people talk like that, you know they're probably not that concerned with cost. Cost is a red herring for the real issue: change in the allocation of public space. Should cars dominate our roads because many people find it convenient? Or should we create a balanced transportation network? Leslie Roberts, on the off chance you're listening to this, cycling isn't an ideology for me. It's how I get around. It's affordable, convenient, and healthy. It's family-friendly. It makes neighborhoods better for walking. It connects people to transit.
Bicycle infrastructures, it's by far the ratio of how much it costs and how many people it moves around in a city in a very low-fi, low-cost, effective way. It has no comparison. I mean, of course, the metro move a lot of people and it's very important, but it's very expensive to build one metro station and two metro stations. So since the bicycle is a tool that's so effective to move people, and it takes a little space on the street, and then you have so many individuals going, no-brainer thing to do for a city. It just have so many benefits for so low cost.
The election is Sunday, November 2nd. Here's where the parties stand on cycling. Take it into consideration alongside any other priorities you have. Projet Montreal is obvious. They're the party that made the recent bike boom happen, first at the borough level and then in City Hall. Their platform has interesting plans for building and upgrading routes. Transition is a new party. They're positive on bikes, but they don't provide the same level of detail on plans for the network. They do have the suggestion of child seats for Bixie, though. Ensemble, well, I've already covered them. I actually had a canvassing candidate insist to me that they're not anti-bike, that they'll even be better on bike infrastructure than Projet. I asked him why ensemble boroughs are obviously worse experiences to bike in, and why their councillors are so often the ones arguing against projects like this. He didn't have a convincing answer. If you want us to take you seriously, you can't have candidates like this writing articles saying, imagine the money we could save by not plowing the bike paths. And the answer is not that much, even in the boroughs that do a good job.
We have that calculation made in the Plateau Mont-Royal some years ago at the borough level, where you have probably the most kilometers, the biggest concentration of plowed bike path. It was 1% of the snow budget. It's very marginal proportion of it.
Action is even more explicitly anti-bike. Their website talks about removing or reconfiguring harmful or makeshift bike lanes, preserving parking, and no more winter Bixie. Future Montreal wants to put an end to the bike lane chaos and permanently ban them from commercial streets. That would have meant no Saint Denis. Gosh, really? Anyway, those are, I guess, the 5 main parties. Go vote on November 2nd. End of video, that's it.